Hey guys, welcome to Beyond the Pitch, presented by CornerStone Staffing. I am Gina Miller with FC Dallas, and this is our career exploration series where we give you career paths, opportunities, and a window into the sports world through our soccer lens. I am so excited to have on the show this week the executive director of the National Soccer Hall of Fame, which, yes, is right here in Frisco, Texas, in the south end of Toyota Stadium. Djorn Buchholz is joining us from his house somewhere in North Texas. Hey, Djorn.
Hi, Gina. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Great to see you here. And I'm so excited to talk about the National Soccer Hall of Fame, talk about your career path, because I think this show is all about showcasing opportunities for people who love sports, love competing, both on a field, on a pitch, on a rink, whatever it is they compete in on a court, but maybe not be able to play professionally or coach, but still have a career path to live out their dreams, fulfill their passions, and do so in an industry and in a sport which they love. That's what's so exciting.
Yep.
So we're going to dive. Yeah. I'm glad you agree. So now, Djorn's career path is one that is all about the pitch. Djorn, I joke that Djorn is soccer Djorn because he has truly worked in so many different areas in the soccer industry. And please get your comments down in the Facebook comment section down below. We're happy to answer any questions that you might have. We'll dive into where you came from, how you got your start, how you got to North Texas, because you took quite a circuitous route to get here. But as we currently stand right now, April 24th, 2020, we're dealing with something that's pretty unprecedented in that we're all working remotely. I happen to be in the office today, but I'm completely socially distanced. There are about 3 of us in all of Toyota Stadium today. And I think there are some concerns and questions about what the future of sports looks like because we are an events-based business. What do you think our industry looks like in the next 5 weeks, 5 months, 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I have a great answer for that because, I mean, this is literally a situation that is changing by the day. You know, like when you think about the global soccer market, I mean, I just saw that, you know, the Bundesliga is looking at starting up, in May 9th, I think, is, behind closed doors. I think the Norwegian league just canceled their entire season today, right? I think it's really all over the place, but you can tell people miss their sports, right? Sports is an opportunity for us to come together when there is tragedy, things like that, to get people around and rallying around one thing. We don't have that right now, that outlet, and it's certainly not the most important thing by any stretch of the imagination, but I think we're all excited to get back to it, but, we got to get back to it in a safe manner, because fans are the most important thing, so safety is going to be important. It may be in MLS studios, I think, as they're calling it for a while, it's an online experience, but I think which is kind of exciting. It's not like being in a venue, but you watch like the NFL draft last night, that experience was pretty cool and something different, but so at least being able to think along those lines. So I don't have a good answer. Every league has to look at this differently. FIFA has to look at it differently. We have to look at it differently in this country, whether you're a soccer league or even a Hall of Fame, right? At some point we want to open up the Hall of Fame again, but how do we do that safely? All things that we're thinking about on a daily basis.
And I just to echo your sentiment, I mean, sports is one of those things that bring countries, brings people, brings communities of diverse backgrounds together in unifying fashion. And when we have had these life-altering moments in the past, one common tenet that has brought people together has been sports, that celebration, whether it was Hurricane Katrina and that first game that the New Orleans Saints had following Katrina. I'm getting chills talking about it.
You just gave me the goosebumps,
right?
Too.
Right? Exactly. It's just, that is what we know. Sports heals. And I do think that while there may be some alterations to how we experience sports going forward, I think they're important. I really do, to helping us heal and celebrate and compete and disagree and debate and all those fun things that I think that we need. How did you get your start in soccer? As a kid? I mean, did your passion develop at a young age?
Yeah, it did. I have a photo of me probably no more than 2 months old, laying on my back, and there's a black and white soccer ball over the corner of my head. My dad was a big soccer guy, didn't play it, but just started to love the sport when I was really young. He then actually started the soccer program at the YMCA in Hastings, Nebraska, where I grew up, and that's just really kind of how I got my start. Really loving the sport was really through that, just playing in the YMCA leagues, and then on to high school and college, and then been lucky enough to turn it into a career following that.
And that's how it happens. I mean, I think that's exactly how it happens. You find a passion for something and it just fuels you, and you cannot think of life without it. And then lo and behold, you land here in Frisco, Texas, opening a Hall of Fame. We're going to get to all of this because I think your career path is so fascinating. And for those of you who are soccer purists, soccer people, soccer P1s, day ones, Djorn Buchholz is your man. Believe me, this man is experienced. You've been a venue press officer, a venue operating officer. You have been, you've worked for so many MLS franchises, different franchises, operated so many things. So then walk us through, you go to college, you go to Hastings College. Were you good enough to play soccer in college?
I was.
I mean, good enough with, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I was on the college soccer team,
Mm-hmm.
and I wasn't a starter, but
That's okay.
I did play enough. I actually have a little claim to fame. I have the third fastest recorded hat trick in soccer history, by the way. I don't know if you knew that.
Djorn,
Yeah.
that needs to be your LinkedIn header right there.
Yeah, I got into a game against Sioux Falls my junior year, and 2 minutes and 35 seconds later, I'd scored 3 goals. So
I
a
love this.
little claim to fame. So, but then beyond what, once I got done with that, I was working, I got done with school. I was working at my dad's advertising agency. Just, he was just helping me out, throwing me a leash, throwing me a bone. So I was there, and to be honest with you, I hadn't thought about soccer as a job. Never even crossed my mind. And my dad said to me one day, he looked at me, he's like, what are you going to do? And I was like, I don't know. And he's like, well, there's these minor league soccer teams out there in the United Soccer League. And I didn't even know that these teams existed. And he's like, why don't you apply? Just send your resume around. So I ended up sending my resume to every MLS team, every minor league soccer team throughout the country. And actually ended up getting a phone call from a woman by the name of Kim Morris from the Indiana Blast of the United Soccer Leagues, and ended up interviewing. And that was really my first job as director of operations and media. I had no idea what the heck that meant. I just packed up my car and my short sleeve button down dress shirts and moved to Indianapolis, just in all of my dorkiness, and moved there and figured out what I was going to do, so I was there for 2 years.
That is such a common thread. If you want to work in sports or media, I mean, your first job was director of operations and media. That's a very minor league job too, because, I worked in minor league sports as well, or covered them, and realized how multi-purpose we are. But there's so many industries in which you train and you work, and you have these postgraduate internships and apprenticeships and residencies. In sports, your best training comes on the job. There are things that college can teach you, but your best training happens while you're doing the work, making the mistakes, learning from those mistakes and moving on. And I think you bring up a great point there. You just packed up and went. Didn't know where you were going, didn't really know what you were going to be doing, but you saw an opportunity. I moved to Guam for my first opportunity, right? In sports media. So I think that's a real trend and common theme among people who work in sports. They start small. They don't really know what they're getting into, but they get into it. And did you fall in love with the work?
Oh yeah. It was a lot of work. I mean, to be honest, we were a front office of 3 running a minor league soccer team. There was Kim, who was the owner and the president. There was a gal by the name of Erin, who was director of tickets and community relations, and I was operations and media. And the 3 of us were running a second division soccer league, But what was amazing about that is when you are an office of 3, I wasn't just director of operations and media. We were all doing everything. I mean, I was helping with sponsorship and ticket sales, and I just got this crash course in minor league sports. I mean, literally the office was the back living room of the owner's house. And they had 5 dogs that would just come in, and walk around the office. I mean, it was something else, but it was a grinded out experience and a pretty amazing 2 years that really opened up my eyes to to professional sports and made me go, this is what I want to hopefully do for the rest of my life.
And let's be real clear here. You had a title, but you probably did everything. You probably shagged some balls, and you may have painted some stripes every now and then. You probably didn't get paid a lot either, I'm assuming.
I'll be honest, it was $22,000 a year.
Yep.
I started at.
And that's common. And that has not grown a lot. Those entry-level sports jobs, that theme is really common. It's a lot of work. It's low pay. It's nights, weekends, and holidays. Is that what you worked? Nights, weekends, and holidays.
Absolutely.
But how much did you learn there? I mean, how much did that set the foundation for your 20-plus year career in this industry? I mean, would you have given that opportunity up for anything now in hindsight?
No, not in hindsight. I mean, at the time, it was very challenging, you know.
It's tough, sure.
But I loved it, you know. But you're right. It was a lot. It was a lot of work when you got 3 people trying to run as big of an event as you can. But no, I wouldn't give that up for anything. It was an amazing experience.
Because you learned so much about every aspect of the industry, right?
Yeah, every single piece.
How were you able to parlay that experience where you oversaw operations in media, but kind of did everything? How were you able to parlay that experience into your next one?
Yeah, so my next move was to the Minnesota Thunder in the same league. It was kind of interesting. Actually, the general manager there, his in-laws lived in Indianapolis, so he would occasionally come to the games when we played Minnesota. And I just got to know him, and he called me up one day and said, hey, you know, after my 2 years there, it was like October of 03, I think. And he said, hey, I've got an opportunity, sales and marketing manager in Minnesota. Are you interested? I think he offered me $25,000, you know, hey, that's a 10%, 12% raise. That's a big deal, right? So I ended up taking that and went to Minnesota in November. My dad and I drive in the U-Haul in my car through snowstorms through Illinois, Wisconsin, all the way to Minnesota, and then took that job.
And I think it's interesting. One thing you said, the person who helped you get that job had parents in Indianapolis. There's an Indianapolis connection. Isn't that so true about careers in this industry? Is that you don't get a lot of them through blind box ads or, you know, job postings. It's very much a relationship business, isn't it?
I can't, as we walk through this, you'll see all the places that I've been. I don't believe one of my jobs has been just because I applied on a website.
Yeah.
They've all been because I knew somebody, and you know, but it's not just about knowing somebody. It's about, you know, being able to be proud of what your relationships have been with those people, to be able to call them and ask them to help you out in situations, you know. I think one thing we got to do through this entire thing is stay true to yourself and build those relationships anywhere you can, because you honestly never know when somebody's going to be able to help you out down the line.
That is so true. So you worked in Minnesota for a while, and tell us what that experience was like, and what did you learn there in your second full-time job?
Yeah, it was amazing. So I got there in November. I'd been sold on that we were going to be playing our games at the National Sports Center, which the Minnesota Thunder had done since 1990. Beautiful facility, a little bit like, you know, FC Dallas's stadium and air, not so much the stadium, but just it's got 52 soccer fields around it. It's like the mecca of soccer. So I got there in November. A week later, I think the organization and the National Sports Center got into a little bit of a rift. We ended up moving our games to a high school stadium in the middle of St. Paul. So really it was shifting all gears, all marketing gears as sales and marketing manager. So we played there. But I think one of the turning moments in my career, it was that spring of 2004. We were just getting ready to play in my first season in Minnesota. And I walked into the general manager's office. His name was Jim Frostlid, still a very good friend of mine. And I said, listen, Jim, I said, I want to be doing what you're doing someday. I said, so if there's anything you feel comfortable including me in, workers' comp, you know, just any of that stuff. I said, I just want to soak it all in and learn as much as I can. He said, I think that's great to hear. And he started including me in a lot of things. Interesting enough, so that was the 2004 season. In the spring of 05, I was 24 years old. We were getting ready to start our season, and Jim Frostlid pulled me aside at a coffee shop on our way back from a meeting and said, hey, I want to let you know I'm taking a job with Field Turf. to sell artificial fields, and I've nominated you to be the next general manager of the Minnesota Thunder. 24 years old. It's about a week before my 25th
Wow.
birthday. I about died, right? Over half the players on the team are older than me, right? It was a scary moment, but I mean, talk about a turning point in a career. I had learned a lot up to that point, but there's nothing like getting thrown in the fire like that. And that was probably the greatest experience that I've had. And really, I was lucky. I feel blessed that that happened to me because it allowed me to maybe jump ahead in some stages in the sports career, right? From going from, I was sales and marketing manager, got promoted to director of marketing, and then general manager really just 3 or 4 years into my career. So that was a turning point. And then I stayed at the Minnesota Thunder. I was the general manager all the way through the 2009 season.
So what, I think it's so interesting. You took that job as the general manager, probably weren't ready. You had a great level of experience, great deal of experience, did a lot in Indiana, did a lot with Minnesota, but then you're thrown into this position where you're 24, 25, you have to lead a team, which we know is very hard. There are probably people you're leading who are older than you, which we know can be very hard as well and very challenging. Are you responsible for budgets and people
Everything.
and career growth, all of these things that 55-year-old executives still struggle with?
Yep.
How did you cope with all of that? I mean, did you, and in doing so, did you even think about, okay, I gotta love the sport. I love soccer. Was it that love of soccer that kept you powering through those challenging times?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's just the sport runs through my veins, So it was, I looked at it and I remember having a conversation with my dad and my mom going, I mean, it wasn't a decision on whether or not I was going to do the job or not. I was just scared, I mean, I was a 24-year-old kid now in charge of, I mean, not huge budget, but $1 million budget, let's call it, for an organization and a second division soccer team. And clearly the youngest general manager in the entire league and probably in professional soccer at that time in this country, but it made me grow up really fast. It was again, a challenging time. I mean, it was long days. I mean, just the amount of stuff that I had to learn, I mean, I had never dealt with workers' comp in my entire life. Right. And now, trying to manage a system like that. And I mean, I was the one signing all of the players and, coach said, I need this guy done, okay, well, how much? Well, it's $750 a month, right? We're going to get him on as a professional soccer player. I mean, but it was an amazing experience and just learned and grew over the next 5 years or 4 or 5 years in that position to move on to the next one.
And what was the next one?
So in the fall of 2009, I actually got approached by the Austin Aztecs at the time. And ended up taking a CEO position with that organization that unfortunately only lasted a year. I was there for that year. We did a lot of great things, so much that the city of Orlando started courting a USL franchise, and Austin happened to be the one. So they ended up actually moving to moving to Orlando. So that was just a one season opportunity for me. But what was kind of interesting when I left my time in Minnesota, and this is another story that it's actually out there in newspapers now from a couple of years ago, you can read it. But unfortunately we had an owner, we had 3 different ownership groups when I was in Minnesota. So even managing that over that course of that time, but unfortunately the last one kind of bailed out about midway through our season in 2009. So I remember, I mean, the front office staff we had in there, we worked for almost 2.5 or 3 months without pay.
Wow.
And never got paid, but it was just this sense of pride that we weren't going to fold a team midway through the year, and we didn't. But unfortunately, that team actually ended up getting scooped up by the National Sports Center itself and operated for a year. But I never felt good about how that season ended. So I was actually lucky enough after my year in Austin, the Minnesota team actually became a league-owned team in the NASL. And the NASL called me up and said, hey, we heard you're no longer with Austin. Would you be interested in going back to Minnesota? Our goal is to we called it a little bit of a fixer-upper, like a house, right? We need to put new shutters on this thing, paint the house, because we want to get it sold to a new owner. So that was kind of, our mantra when I went back to Minnesota in really January of 2011, was to, over the course of the next 2 years, to try to find an ownership group for that team as a league-owned team to ensure the long-term viability. And that was exciting to me because, like I said, I never felt good about how many of us left Minnesota, just in this giant state of what's going to happen to the organization. And I wanted to go back and right the ship.
So you said you did a lot of really good things in Austin. As we look for, things to celebrate professionally, what were some of those things that you did so well in Austin that forced Orlando to court the Aztecs to the Sunshine State?
Yep. I mean, we increased attendance, right? I think we became much cooler in the marketplace, right? We were trying to do everything we could to align ourselves with the cool and weird and hip things happening in Austin. From a financial standpoint, we made the organization just much more viable. That organization was, as a minor league soccer team, was losing a lot of money, and we were able to cut that substantially in half. So I think we just raised the profile of the organization. I think one of the things at the time that was challenging is, the organization wanted to get a stadium built. And at that time, there just wasn't the appetite for that. So I think that was another big reason that the organization ended up going to Orlando, because Orlando was interested in getting to that point and potentially going to Major League Soccer down the road. I don't think Austin, even though they're going to be an MLS team next year, 10 years ago, I just don't think the city was ready for that. So at the time, it was sad to see the Aztecs lose, but probably best in the long run, just because I don't think they were ready for an MLS team at that point. But we just were able to raise the profile of the organization to a point that somebody else wanted the same one in their city.
So did you go from Austin to Sporting Kansas City? Was that the next step?
I went Austin back to Minnesota for 2011 and the 2012 season. Probably two of my most fondest seasons in my entire career. It was just this blue collar attitude that we went back to Minnesota with. A league-owned team, right? So other owners in the NASL were pitching in money to fund Minnesota, right? We had the smallest budget in the league. And it was kind of a fascinating year in 2011 as a league-owned team. I tell people we were trying to fix up the house, right? Put new shutters on it and paint it so that somebody wanted to buy it. We also just happened that year to win the best yard on the block prize, because we ended up winning the NASL championship in its first year as a league-owned team, which I don't think made the other owners very happy. But we did that. And then next year, we ended up taking the team all the way to the championship match and ended up losing in the finals, again as a league-owned team. But during that 2012 season, we gained the interest of Dr. Bill McGuire, who is now the majority owner of the Minnesota Thunder, and he bought the team from the NASL in the spring of 2013, and has now taken them to Major League Soccer. So my next move was really in the spring of 13, after Bill McGuire had bought the team. For me, a little bit, it was mission accomplished, right? Went back to Minnesota to try to secure the long-term viability of the franchise. We as an organization and the amazing people that work there, I think of Kevin Friedland, Angie Blaker, just an amazing group of people. We got it done. So at that point, I wanted to try to move on to the next step in my career. So I reached out to the old grounds manager at the National Sports Center, who was now in operations at Sporting Kansas City, because I saw they had a director of fan experience position open. So I reached out to him and he got me in touch with the right person, and I ended up going to Sporting Kansas City in I think it was April of 2013.
Relationships, all about relationships. I love that. So you spent some time in Sporting Kansas City, and I always bug Djorn and pick his brain about Sporting Kansas City as we talk about Toyota Stadium, FC Dallas, National Soccer Hall of Fame. Always picking his brain there. But in the interest of time, give us a quick overview about some of the cool events. We see your Copa America banner behind you, because not only did you work full-time for these franchises, we're going to get to the Hall of Fame in a moment, but not only did you work full-time for these franchises, you managed, produced, and oversaw some of the biggest soccer matches in the sport's history, at least here in North America. What is that experience like, and what does one of those people do exactly?
Yeah, so I've been lucky enough to be involved in really three major events. Copa America behind me that was here in 2016. Then I ran Gold Cup as a venue at the Alamo Dome in San Antonio in 2017, and then this last summer I ran Gold Cup at NRG Stadium in Houston, and those are some of the most fun events. I mean, there is nothing like, I mean, I'm so lucky that I get those opportunities, and I'm lucky that the organizations that I'm working for full time allow me to go and do that. Someday I hope that when the 2026 World Cup comes here, that I can be involved in that. And these are all what I think are warm ups to the main event, So, but those are amazing, amazing things to pull off because you're walking into a venue, right? I mean, yeah, there's build up, you do some site visits, but you've got major international teams coming. I've been lucky enough that in 17 and 19, I had Mexico in both of my venues.
Wow.
That is a very difficult thing to pull off a lot of times. But each one of those, we had four teams in market, and they were double headers. All right. So they are back-to-back games on the same night, which provides its own sense of challenges. But being able to do those, I mean, you're popping into a market a week before the event, and you have to rally everybody, in that venue, the people that you've brought in, you've hired, to get ready to pull off one of the biggest events the city's going to see, a week later. And that is excitement, and those are 16, 18-hour days and little sleep. But to walk out there, and as the venue manager in those situations, you get to sit right behind the fourth official at midfield for a stadium that's got 90,000 people in it. It's one of the things I love working about in sports is you do all this work, right, for the week, and on Saturday you get to watch it all happen, and that's what those events are for me, just all that work, and then just sit there and just take it in. And it's just, I mean, again, it gives me goosebumps. They're some of the most fun things to do ever is these giant events, which I'm lucky that I've been able to do three of them so far, hopefully many more.
Well, you pulled off one giant event in helping relaunch the National Soccer Hall of Fame. It was a museum, a true museum in Oneonta, New York, up until about 2010. And then nobody goes to Oneonta, New York, and it shut down. And all of these artifacts, and really the story of the history of soccer in the United States, was in a bunch of warehouses in North Carolina. And so a project went underway in the south end of Toyota Stadium, a renovation project that took a few years. And late 2017, early 2018, there was a call for an executive director of what at the time was going to be the museum in its second iteration. You ended up getting the gig, and you got this opportunity, and you really came at it with a filter of, we're not going to make it a museum. It's not going to be staid. It's not going to be boring, and it's going to be different. How much did your experience from being the director of operations and media, where you did everything, to running all these venues, to being the CEO, to being a director of fan experience, how much of all that tracked right into this position at the National Soccer Hall of Fame and help you define what this thing truly is?
Yeah, I think, when I think about the path to getting the Hall of Fame executive director job, again, I just want to make a mention. It was a relationship, actually two relationships. First off, Brian Remedi, who was at US Soccer at the time, I used to rent field boards from in Minnesota in my 2003, 2004, 2005 seasons. He ended up he was working for TGI that does all the field boards. We would fight over whether it was going to cost me $5,000 a year or $6,000 a year. But that was a relationship from back then. Then he's at US Soccer involved in this project. When I heard that, the Hall of Fame was coming online, I really applied for it in December of 15. I also reached out to Luis Muzi, who was at FC Dallas, who I obviously knew was involved in this. I'd known Luis since his time at the Miami Blues in the old USL. I think he went and talked to Dan. I talked to Brian Remedi. The next thing I know, I had an interview for this in really April of 16 was my first interview with, I think at that time it was John Wagner, and just a close group. But it was really when I came back to interview again, then in August of 16, that I got the sense of why I was lucky enough to be in that room as I sat there with Dan Clark, Dan Flynn from US Soccer, Brian Remedi, and all these people. they weren't looking for a museum guy. And I think that was, I mean, selfishly, I was happy about that, right? But I think it was the right move based on what they were trying to convey for what the Hall of Fame was going to be. They were looking for a soccer guy, right? But could learn the museum part rather than a museum person that had to figure out the soccer part. Because I think that transition would have been much more difficult.
Not a curator. We didn't need a curator.
We didn't need a curator, right?
Yeah.
We had the right people involved to find the right artifacts and that kind of stuff. It was more about how can we make sure that this tells the story of soccer. And I think they could see my passion for this sport, which again was built up over this entire career in playing. And I think that's what I believe sold them on me in the end, was just this appetite I had for making sure that we got this right. And I mean, I walked into my second interview with a business plan, on how we were going to open up the Hall of Fame, passed it out and talked to them about, hey, we need virtual reality. These are already things they had been talking about that I didn't even know. So I just think, we just started marrying, really what we wanted to do together. And I ended up getting the job in April of 2017. So applied in December of 15, ended up getting the job in April of 17. So a long process, but one that was well worth it.
That is amazing. And describe the Hall of Fame, because I've been to Canton, been to Cooperstown, been to the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame in Knoxville, been to a lot of them. This one is unlike any other.
Yep. I think that was the goal. We wanted to be different. Nothing against all of those other Hall of Fames, but we wanted to do something that's never been done before.
Yeah.
I love Hall of Fames and I love what they do. And I think a lot of them are starting to make some changes, and maybe we've driven some of that a little bit because we created, certainly we've got our museum components, right? Over 400 artifacts in there that tell the history of the game. But like I said, when I came in, I remember looking at the south end of Toyota Stadium. It said future home of the National Soccer Hall of Fame Museum. And I was like, I just wanted to go down there with red paint and cross off museum and like graffiti experience, and that took a while to like drive into people's heads. But just because I think it gives a different connotation, but you can't just call it that and then not do it, right? So it was fun to be able to figure out, okay, how do we turn this into an experience? Well, we bring in facial recognition with our great partners at NEC. All right, well, what does that mean? Well, we didn't really know what that meant when we started, right? But and that's what was so fun about this project, is being able to take, we've got this facial recognition technology. How can we use it to create an experience? So the most amazing thing we do is we take people's photos, we ask them some questions about themselves, their favorite soccer teams, where they're from, kind of their fan level and their favorite soccer position. And then based on that, there are 13 audio visuals inside of the Hall of Fame that recognize people when they walk up to them and give them information that we think is going to be most interesting to them based on the questions they answered. So I think there's a couple cool things that we've done is we've called it an experience, right? And we've been able to back it up. I also think another great thing that we coined ourselves is the most personalized experience in sports, and it just rolls off the tongue. And so I'm so proud of that, because I think we've truly done it. And it's been a pretty incredible project to be a part of.
It's a lot of fun too. I think that experience expands outside these walls. Full disclosure, this year we'd hope to execute a number of series and things aligned with the Hall of Fame, and coronavirus kind of put a dent in our plans there. But, it is an experience, and we take the experience across the country with the inductee announcements. You plan this entire inductee weekend. Year one was Imagine Dragons, a huge concert, Hall of Fame game with this great crowd. Last year, One Republic and the Fray was there. So it's not just something housed in a building. It really is an experience. When you think about what this property, if you will, brings to the soccer story here. When you talk to Hall of Famers who, may not have been as engaged with the previous iteration, do they get a sense of pride now in that, or a greater sense of pride, I should say, a greater sense of pride in that they really do have a home now?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I remember going through the process of getting the place open. We had a great deal of memorabilia and artifacts, but there were things we had an idea of things that we wanted, to help tell that story, and needed to get our hands on them. So I mean, myself, the official historian, Jim Trecker, I mean, we're literally calling Hall of Famers, right? And they're answering the phone right away, right? When they know it's us, right? Which is amazing. You know, and I'm talking to John Harkes, and I'm like, John, I need your 1996 DC United jersey. No problem. It's in the mail tomorrow, right? And every Hall of Famer was like that. It was unbelievable, just because I think there's this new reinvigorated sense of pride that they have a home again. They didn't have one for 8 years, right? So they will do almost anything to help us at this point, which has been incredibly encouraging.
So you have gotten to experience so much in the sports world, whether it's running an entire Gold Cup match, opening a Hall of Fame, which I'm looking at right now in the Toyota Stadium conference room. I should give us a flip around here. You've gotten to do so much. You've gotten to launch things, be a part of minor league franchises, which are just so much fun. You know, those dollar beer nights, you know, are a lot of fun. What is your biggest pinch me moment that you have had working in soccer?
Biggest pinch me moment. This wasn't on your list. This wasn't on the list of questions.
You can have more than one. You can have more than one.
I think there's two moments that I'm incredibly fond of, that I think about all the time, that are probably the most proud moments I have in my career. Does that work for you?
Absolutely.
Okay. The first one, as I mentioned earlier, was getting Minnesota sold to the right owner. That franchise had been in turmoil for years. And to see what they're doing today, I mean, that is the owner, Dr. Bill McGuire, taking that team to MLS, and has built a stadium literally 2 blocks from the small high school stadium that we were playing at in 2004 and 5. So that being able to help secure the longevity of that franchise has been probably one of my most proudest moments. And then the second one for me truly is opening the Hall of Fame. You know, this is a sport that has given me so much over almost 20 years now. I saw the Hall of Fame, and this is maybe a little bit selfishly, but it was an opportunity for me to give back to it in a way that I think only one person is going to be able to do, you know, maybe forever, is to be involved in building a Hall of Fame for the people that, and the Hall of Famers that I watched when I was 5 years old, 6 years old. To be able to turn around and give them this back through the help of all of the partners has probably been the most rewarding piece for me, was opening up the Hall of Fame and having all of those NASL 50 reunion people there, all of the Hall of Famers. And that first induction ceremony was truly something special. It
was special. And they were so appreciative. That's the sense that I got, not just the inductees, but to your point, the older Hall of Famers, the more mature ones who'd been around for a while. They were so excited to see you and to meet you in person or see you in person and just experience the story of soccer in the United States in real life and see these artifacts. What's your favorite piece in the Hall of Fame? Your piece of physical artifact, not exhibit.
Yep. My favorite piece, and it was a late addition to the Hall of Fame, is really Tony DeCicco's game notes from that he, you know, paper notes that he gave, you know, the women's team in 1999 before the final against China. You know, it's amazing to sit there and stare at those 2 pages of notes. And I mean, we had Becky Sauerbrunn and Kelly O'Hara in the Hall of Fame, you know, before all the right during She Believes Cup, and they were looking at that, and on the left-hand side is the lineup for that final, and they were just like, look at those names on that piece of paper, like those legend, you know, and just looking at that and just studying, you know, what was in Tony's mind. What I think is really cool about it is it's a lost art, because everything is a whiteboard now, right? That gets wiped off after every single game. And this was literal flip charts. So for somebody to have the thought process to go back into the locker room after that match and grab those 2 pieces of paper, and give them to Tony, because they were actually with his son, who we were able to get reproductions from. That's probably my favorite piece inside of the Hall of Fame.
I'm actually posting in the comments section as we speak a video of you showing Mia Hamm the game notes. It's on Instagram right now, and I'm posting it. So please click the link down below if you guys are watching. So as we wrap up,
one more thing I just wanted to mention on amazing moments. And this might get me a little emotional, but
No, it's good.
When Fernando showed up to the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. Fernando Clavijo. Mm-hmm.
Because he wasn't sure he was going to make it. He wasn't sure he was going to make it. And he told me. But to watch him walk through the doors, that was a good one.
Pretty special. Yeah, it was pretty special. As we wrap it up here on Beyond the Pitch, presented by CornerStone Staffing, a couple questions in the comments section that I would like for you to answer. And Charlie has one. She wants to know if there are any archives online showing previous years' Hall of Fame induction ceremonies. They weren't quite the production that they are now, but I believe you can go on to U.S. Soccer's YouTube channel and find some of them, not all of them, some previous Hall of Fame induction ceremonies.
Yep, that is correct. We could probably at some point get those over to our page as well. Is probably a good idea. But yeah, I think really starting in the late, probably the middle of the 2000s is when you can find a bunch of those up online. And then
one last takeaway, and there are a number of questions aligning with this. What's your advice to someone who wants to work in sports? And is your advice to someone who wants to work in soccer maybe a little bit different from that overall advice for someone who wants to work in sports? Two-pronged question there.
Yeah, I don't know that it is different. I think the earlier you can get involved in your career. I think about, I grew up in Hastings, Nebraska, right? Pro sports are not a thing in Hastings, Nebraska.
Absolutely.
So, but I was doing internships at a foundry and, a community college and just trying to do whatever I could to get experience. But I think about, internships for college kids, that if they're in a city where there's a professional sports, I don't think it matters what the sport is. I think it's important to do everything you can to get in there and learn the business. Gina, you look at your interns, they're doing sometimes, they're doing real life work, and it's important to get that under your belt and be able to have that on your resume. If sports are interesting to people, I tell people, you have to be ready for it's a lot of hours. It's not a lot of pay, especially at the start, but it has to be a passion play for you. And really at the end of the day, if you work your tail off in sports, it will get noticed, and you will work your way up. Unfortunately, a lot of people fizzle out of sports, right?
Mm-hmm.
But everybody wants to work in sports. There's so always somebody on your tail who you need to make sure that you'll work harder than them. There's always somebody right behind you that wants your job. It's a little bit like that. So you have to stay on your toes for sure. So get your experience as much as possible. I just, in watching FC Dallas, it's amazing how many people go from being interns to full-time staff, right? It's amazing, right?
We're proud of that. Yeah.
Get in.
Yeah.
Homegrowns.
You homegrowns. I like that. You said a lot of lessons that I think are so good for so many industries, but particularly the sports industry. The hustle. You got to have some hustle. Get the experience. You came from Hastings, Nebraska. You had every excuse not to land in Dallas-Fort Worth, the 5th largest media market, one of the best sports markets in the country. You had every reason and excuse in the book not to be in DFW. You did it through hard work, some hustle, finding a way, busca la forma, to get the experience and cultivating those relationships. Making sure you cultivated them, respected them, kept in touch with people. You didn't say goodbye and not check back in a year or two later. It's a pick up the phone, shoot them a text, how you doing, how's the family kind of thing. And that helped you get to where you are. And wherever you may go from here, I think those lessons are just so good for anybody. Whether or not you really want to work in sports, I think those are really, really valuable career lessons.
Yep. Good.
All righty. Good. Well, we hope you guys enjoyed Beyond the Pitch, presented by CornerStone Staffing. Simply go to fcdallas.com/beyondthepitch, where we have a warehouse of career profiles available, from a career in lawn maintenance to accounting for a sports franchise to sales and business development. We're exploring every single aspect of the sports industry outside of being a professional athlete that you can pursue if you're passionate about working in sports. Most importantly, we hope each and every one of you stay safe and stay healthy during this dynamic time we're all facing. For Djorn Buchholz and Foster Naylor, our producer, I am Gina Miller. Thanks so much for joining us today. We'll see you again next week.